There is an art to marking an orchestral part so that it has just enough information to be helpful, not too much to be overwhelming, not so little to be vague and confusing. If you are looking to master this art, this video is for you. I'm playing Mahler's Fifth Symphony with the San Francisco Symphony this week, and though I've played it before, there's always something new, and I want to make sure that I'm prepared for the orchestra that I'm about to join. When you do a lot of subbing like I do, sometimes you get called at the last minute, and in that case, you just do the best with what you've got. I've done a whole video about that, which I will link up to here. But in this case, I knew that this was coming, so I had the luxury of preparing the way I like to prepare, and a big part of that for me is going and getting the actual part. You might ask, why not just download this part from IMSLP, the wonderful Petrucci music library? Yeah, that's a great option, and I do that, and I actually did that for this piece before I got a chance to go down to the hall. But there's nothing to me like the actual physical part. So we're going to go through and just take a look at what this part contains that makes it so helpful to look at. And a lot of you watching this video may not have seen a part marked for a professional level orchestra. And there are a lot of things that you'll see in more of an amateur orchestra or a school orchestra that are going to be different than in a professional orchestra, so I'm going to point these out as we go through this. So the first thing you might notice is this language up here, the C sharp and D in parentheses. That is a sort of code or shorthand that we bass players have developed to mark what needs to be open on our extensions. Most of the time in orchestras, you'll see an extension like I have on my bass, and I've done many videos about that, which I will link up to here. But this is super helpful for knowing what's coming and what you have to be prepared for. My wife is a harpist, and they have a similar type of shorthand for showing what pedals need to be in what configuration. So that's what this is. So I know that coming up, I'm going to have a C sharp and a D. Now here's one reason why I'm glad I picked up this part. Notice that these have been marked completely separate for these licks, so that you have the articulation. Digga-digga-dom. I'm playing the lower part, the lower divisi. I knew that once I picked up the part, I saw where I was sitting, so that's helpful too, just to know where you're sitting. One of the things that might strike you immediately is that there are bowings and there are words and dynamics and that sort of thing, but there are no fingerings or very few fingerings. And that is common practice in at least any professional level group that I've played in. Fingerings are much more common in amateur groups and student groups, and there's nothing wrong with putting fingerings in my opinion, but the general rule of thumb for professional level section playing, which is what this is for, is that you mark the same bowings, but you do your own fingerings unless there's a real reason to unify the fingerings. That will come down from the principal, and that can happen. Or if it's bafflingly challenging, like Nielsen's Fifth Symphony or something like that, just about anybody would be happy to have some fingerings in there. But for something like Mahler 5, which is challenging, but not on the level of unfamiliar and complex like Nielsen 5, this is quite commonly played. You're probably not going to see too many fingerings. Oftentimes you'll see some markings up here by the title of the piece indicating when this was bowed, or by the librarian. There's nothing here, so I'm assuming these are just stock parts from the San Francisco Symphony. Maybe they just kind of do the same thing all the time in this part. But if a guest connector is coming, you will frequently see some other indication. It's kind of helpful to know where the part's from, if it's your local orchestra's just library part, or if it's from the guest conductor, and that sort of influences what bowings the principal might choose to do or not to do, and we could do a whole super nerdy thing on that if you want. You will notice courtesy accidentals written in here. That is showing what note is the trill going to for the upper note. So that's just helpful because we are in 4 sharps here. And so as you're reading, and then you got double sharps, it's like trying to do the sharp math, or whether it's a half step or whole step. This is just helpful while not being too much. It's some information, what you need, without drowning the player in information. And then just some courtesy dynamics. See, Mahler did write sempre fortissimo, and there's a crescendo marked here, probably just to avoid the tendency to diminuendo, because the top part diminuendos, the bottom part stays sempre fortissimo. That's very common in Mahler, and knowing a little bit, or a lot, is even better about the composer and their time period and their proclivities is helpful. Mahler was super hyper detail oriented, so all these details, everything, the dynamics, the accents, the different information on the different lines, that is super important to process. And And then we got a courtesy dynamic here, just remembering that it's fortissimo while the upper part is pianissimo. Yeah, you're going to feel weird if your stand partner is playing pianissimo and you're playing fortissimo unless it's made very obvious. So though this is not technically necessary, that's very helpful. And then we see some pickups. That's helpful to know. Bum, bum. So that you don't play this pizzicato early. Secco, that means dry. And then as we keep going, you'll see eyeglasses marked. That is very common, just means look up. and whenever there is any sort of tempo change or any sort of change at all, the thing I always would tell students is you see a ritardando, you see an accelerando, you see anything like that, what that really means is look up and see what's going on. These little squiggly lines, that means slow down, and that's very easy to write when you're in rehearsal, and that is just a common marking. You will also see back arrows. That means what you think, pull the tempo back. Another pickup note indication, and then you will often see VS in orchestral parts. That means turn the page fast. So I am the inside player for this upcoming week, and so my job is to turn the pages. And so I will get ready, and I will probably not play these last two bars, and I will just turn. You'll also see a courtesy arco marked here, because when we turn the page, it's arco, and you might not be prepared for that psychologically. You're going to probably have your bow in your hand still, but just knowing that, that's just nice preparation. Another reason why I like to get the actual physical part, or a couple reasons, actually. One is that it's just bigger in my slowly aging eyes, though the iPad's great and it's backlit, that's all great, that this is much larger than my iPad, and this is what I'm going to be playing on. I find it helpful to actually look at the physical document that I'm going to be looking at, and to get a sense of the part as you go through it and the page turns. I find that super helpful. And even little things like, is the part really hard to lay down on the stand? I'm gonna have to be fighting with it. Not so for this Mahler part, but you never know. Lots of courtesy bowings, and then anytime there's something that's a little bit rhythmically ambiguous, you can see that this triplet is marked here just so you can think bum bum ba ba da bum. And then just stuff that makes it easy for the section to unify, like that you're going to do a down and an up. And this is a symbol you might not be familiar with if you haven't played a lot of professional gigs. That is a down and an up bow put together. It's just a quick way to write that. And you could write an up bow separately, but that's very common to see. We got more eyeglasses, and then you can see that veloce is bracketed. That is just to help bring it out visually. And then just a courtesy reminder that this is still pizzicato. And now you see X, D flat. That means to open up your extension to D flat. That means we got a D flat coming up, so you need to be ready for it. And you want to have this marked, if you're the one doing the marking, at a place where there's time to do that. So I wouldn't want to, if I was marking the part, which I certainly wouldn't be for this gig coming up, but I wouldn't want to mark it like here because there's no time. And then you got this, oh crap, I got to change to D flat, kind of nagging in the back of your head. So marking it when there's time to do it is helpful. Courtesy dynamics, you can see Mahler did write pianissimo, but it's easy to forget, especially when you're doing all these machinations of trills and grace notes and all that. Because this is Mahler, I feel obligated to mention that there's a ton of German in here, and it is helpful to learn all the German in any sort of Germanic composer, 19th century Germanic composers' work, or early 20th century in the case of Mahler. So there are many resources how to do that. The good old Oscar Zimmerman books had a whole page or two that were just all the common Mahler phrases. I will try to find that in this video, or you can easily find it by doing a Google search. But just knowing what these different terms mean in German is super helpful. And you play enough Strauss and certainly Mahler, and you'll start to just sort of get these in your brain. Here's a common one that you might not know if you don't play in professional groups. We've got 8 bars of rest. You flip the page, you see 8 bars of rest marked up there. That's like a courtesy rest reminder, because you flip the page and you're like, how many rests were those? And you think it was 8, but it could have been 6, could have been 4, and you looked over at the cellos for some reason and you lost it. So just marking those rests, you will see that so frequently in parts, and we got that here whenever it happens. We go down to this 3-part divisi right here, and you'll see this little mark right here, this little tick. That means that the person or people, in this case playing this part, are going to play this. I have bass 4 right here that I took home because I knew I was on the 4th stand. So the principal has decided that the 4th stand is going to play the middle part. That eliminates a ton of confusion of like, hey, what are we supposed to do? You this, and it's different again with different composers and different time periods. More courtesy pickups, even indicating the instrument just to be ready. There is a courtesy down bow. There's a down bow there, but getting your brain ready, thinking about the pickups, that's just ready to helpful so that the section isn't like half of them in the up bow and half of them down bow, because when you see pianissimo, you're kind of thinking up bow. You might not be thinking frog. Triplets with a rest. So these are just things to make sure that you pits together. And after the first or second rehearsal, hopefully you will, but you have a busy week. Maybe you had a chaotic Saturday and you come to the concert, even though you've played it before, that's very easy to forget. If you were in a community orchestra, you might not be playing Mahler 5, but if you were and you hadn't had a rehearsal for a week, that's a very easy thing to let slip just in the chaos of regular life. So marking that sort of thing, but not everything, which is the subtle art of this, is key. And now here you're seeing some marks. So this is the way that this is typically done in this orchestra. But you see, for this orchestra, and then we hold and do an up bow and whoomp. Here's a courtesy reminder, just that it's fortissimo the whole time. That also means make sure your bow is rosined, and you gotta use, in my opinion, some nice sticky orchestral bass rosin for this kind of passage work, and make sure that you can still play pianissimo, but you really want to have that articulation. So we close the extension, got a couple bars to do that. And then frog. That's all we need to know. Stay by the frog and the articulation will come. Save, that means save the bow, because you're going to be forte, bum, ba ba, and then you got to go piano and then down bow, and just making sure that you got enough bow. That's just enough information to let you know what you need to do. Got some tuba markings here, and the reason why this is probably in here is that we bass players so frequently play essentially what the tuba player is playing that it can be a little confusing when the tuba part's different, especially if it's almost the same. And in this case with Mahler, it's almost the same. The tuba's on the beat, we are not, and so that's just an indication that, yeah, you're doing the right thing, even though the tuba is doing something different. Hold steady, bass players. So here's a change. We are not going to do the tremolos that are in this edition. We're going to change the bows, and so these are scribbled out, but that might be a little bit confusing if you were just glancing at this initially. So having the bows marked right there, that it's down, up, that's enough information to let you know. Separate notes, just quarter notes. But writing all that information, first of all, there's not a lot of room to write like a sentence about what exactly to do. So trying to indicate it in symbols is just faster, quicker, easier to process when you're in the moment. You will also see these sorts of lines in the part, and that is generally in a passage where the rhythm, it can be a bit confusing. And so this is just to indicate where the beats are, where the conductor is going to be conducting. So these are triplet half notes, and then there's a rest in the middle. So this is just an easy way to kind of clear that up. It looks a little funky in this part. So it's like 1, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. And notice, we have not had a lot of these slashes in here. When I have played in amateur groups or school groups, and again, nothing wrong with doing different things for different levels or stages, but I see a lot of slashes frequently, and that can be a little confusing because there's so much information on the page, right? We have dots, dashes, courtesy accidentals, slowdowns, eyeglasses, and so to have slashes everywhere too, it's just an awful lot to process. You'll also see this N3, that means in 3. Now sometimes you see people write IN3, in 3 or N3. That's just an indication for the tempo mark, or sometimes you'll see people just put a couple slashes. If it goes from like 4 to 2, you might see 2 slashes for 2 or 4 slashes for 4. Again, just something that's quick and easy to process, and some players might have different preferences, but very common to see these slashes to just indicate tempo change, or definitely if the rhythm is a little bit vague or possibly complex. Now, if you ever see something parenthesed out, that means you're not playing. And in this case, die Hälfte. I am not die Hälfte that Mahler is referring to. So I am not playing this. Now, it is so easy, even though it says die Hälfte, shouldn't you just see that and know? Well, we got 2 bars of rest, our eyes are here, we're thinking about the key change, and then all of a sudden we see that note right here. And it would be so easy to play, and so you will see this very frequently. And if you're ever playing Baroque music where the cello and bass play a lot of the same part, this is very commonly marked, at least in professional parts, but it's great for amateurs too, or school groups, and that's just an indication that no, you don't play this, and then you do play the stuff that's not in parentheses. This passage is notoriously tricky for Bowings, and so this is very clearly marked. We got down, down, up, down, up. Oh, I should have mentioned this from the beginning, but listening to whatever you're working on is key, and really knowing this piece. I know this piece pretty well, so I kind of know the style, but like this might seem totally baffling if you didn't listen to it. So as you are looking at this part, listening to it is super duper helpful. And even with repertoire that I've played many, many times and known for decades, I still find that a refresher listen is great, either with the part or without the part. So we've got these divisi here. We go back and forth and back and forth, and then tutti. So everybody's in here, got some more bowings, steady. Okay, so just making sure that we don't rush is probably the tendency. And now you see this 15 bars of rest. This has been divided into 5 bars and 10 bars. You will see this very frequently, and that is just an indication of there's a chunk of music that's 5 bars, there's a chunk of music that's 10 bars. And that's very helpful when you're sitting there trying to count all the rests. And then you got this 1 bar and you got these 9 bars, so there's just a lot of random rest stuff, and then we have to come in here. Now we do have viola cues, but I find it very dangerous to just shut my brain off until these viola cues come here. They might miss the cues. I might not hear the cues, and I find it a little scary to just get out of the groove mentally. So trying to stay engaged with the music, breaking these up, it helps eliminate confusion and just keep me connected with where I am in the music and in the part. A couple things that are changed just in terms of bowing, just for clarity. It's not going to change the character of the music. It's just more of a technical thing to make it execute more gracefully on the bass. You will often see this sort of double slash or various numbers of slashes when you have a fermata or a change in the music. This is how many beats you're going to see from the conductor. So this will vary from orchestra to orchestra. In this case, we're going to look for 1, 2, bop, bop. So, and this, if you don't want to step in it, paying attention to this is really helpful, because oftentimes conductors will give 1 prep. They give bop, bop. In this case, they got 2 preps. So if you did not pay attention, you could just come in by your lonesome, bop, 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 bop. And I find that whenever I come in by my lonesome, I am particularly bad sounding in that moment. Generally, I'm sure I sound wonderful, but there's just something about, like, not only will I come in wrong, but I'll like scratch my bow or not get the fundamental or something like that. So paying attention to those markings, very important in my opinion. Time. That is such a helpful thing to see, because as the page turner, you don't necessarily know what's coming. So frequently you get to hear a boom, boom, and I would go, and then it's the adagiato, and there's all the time in the world. And you look like you're actually kind of screwing up the performance a little bit by doing that, because there's this like dramatic moment and there should be silence. And there shouldn't be one bass player like fumbling with the part. So time, that's all you need to say, time. That means there's enough time that you don't have to futz with the page. The conductor's gonna wipe their brow, something's gonna happen, there's plenty of time. So then you leisurely turn when the vibe on stage, the character of the room has changed, the audience will shuffle around and cough and all that kind of stuff. And then we have the adagiato. And here we have some slashes. This is just to show what's going to happen. You'll see 1, 2, 3, 2 slashes with eyeglasses. So that means 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. Now Mahler has indicated this with lots of German, but this is just nice, no nonsense marking so that you can comprehend what's about to happen. Now here you're seeing Bowings in parentheses. That means use it if you need it. So this is an indication from the principal bass that generally we want to do the same bowings in a section. So I would not take that up bow, even if I needed it. I would just find a way to really stretch that down bow, unless there's this marking, up bow with a parenthesis. That means we'll do a down bow, but feel free to take an up bow if you need more bow. And that's a great, just sort of like a liberty mark. It gives you the freedom to do that if you need extra bow. And then we come down here, and this is a little bit of an indication of free bowing. You see there's like an up bow, a down bow marked here. That means change When necessary, you'll almost certainly have to change for such a long passage, but it doesn't have to be at this specific location. If the parentheses weren't there, we'd be changing right where it was marked. Here, it's like change when it makes sense, and just with a certain level of experience, you know, okay, well, if we're doing that, let's try not to maybe change it at the exact same time so we can kind of let our bowings merge into this beautiful section legato. You'll see free right here, so we just know that there's going to be a lot of freedom with the tempo. This is always a weird bar. Mahler has this, and you're supposed to repeat this bar twice. Some copyist probably made an error and just wrote that in rather than redoing the whole part sometime a long time ago. So that is marked in the part, but seeing BIS, and that is very easy to just sort of overlook, and then you go on and play the wrong harmony. So this has just been bracketed just as an indication to repeat and got the repeat marks and everything. So just a clarification. Anytime you see two lines like that, that means railroad tracks. That means stop, because we stop at railroad tracks. And that you can see that these are pretty dark. So that's a very unfortunate fortissimo to go onto by yourself. Again, that would be the moment that my G string would be rattling against the string and I'd play a little out of tune and be buzzing, or some combination of those things. So just anytime you see those two lines like that, yeah, stop. And you wait for the indication to go on, and you go on. Because there aren't any extra slashes or something, you know that the conductor's just going to sort of give it and you go. If there was some more information, that means you do it differently. But if there's nothing marked, it's going to be the normal way, the usual way. But double lines, that just means stop and wait and watch and then move together. These long slurs or connection markings, the legato markings, however you want to describe them, that Mahler has here, the idea is to connect. The string player or bass player technique is not what Mahler was thinking about here. So we take bows where it makes sense for a section, and we do change our bows here because they're marked, they're not in parentheses or anything like that. But this is, we know that because there is this slur in the part, we're going to have it sound like it's all connected, though we are changing bows. That's a technical thing, but the musical intent is to have it all connect. That's a look at how an orchestral double bass part is marked. You saw that there were no fingerings in this part, but if you want to learn the rules of good fingering, check out this video we've got linked up, and we'll see you in the next one.